Welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Placer, and joining me, my co-host, the indie developer currently working on the game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. It's been a really busy week. There was like an
Mm-hmm.
update to Unreal, so another update I have to look over and parse over. Um, and I got my COVID booster. I got sick for a little bit. That
Mm-hmm.
really took me down. So I'm still kind of recovering from that. But we still got. I still had to grind, get all the work done. But other than that, pretty good. I'm feeling a little humbled though, Josh. How are you doing?
Yeah. It's been a busy week as well. My books are featured in yet another Humble bundle,
Oh,
their design book bundle that's going on right now. So if you guys want to pick up my books for super duper cheap, that's currently available on Humble.
yeah, now you can definitely get 10 copies, a whole bunch of copies for sure.
At least 60, just to be
At
on the
least
safe
60,
side.
yeah, 60 this time.
Other than that, I'm also kind of recovering. I got my code booster last Saturday, and I'm about like 90% of the way better. I still feel like a little bit off, but hopefully. And I did, to Chris come, I did some yard work yesterday, so I'm resting from that as well. But yeah, it's been a very crazy week. Work on the book continues. I am just about to hit 20,000 words in it. I have to say I'm maybe like 70 to 80% done writing it. So the
Yeah.
light at the end of the tunnel is starting to get there.
But there was a whole bunch of festivals going on. How'd you even
Yeah.
get that done?
I don't know, and I'm going to be taking a night off from the festivals tonight because I want to do some research with Pokemon, the trading card game, because you can play it
Ah,
online.
yes.
That is the last of the big three that I have not ever actually played. So I'm going to.
Actually, the wife, actually, she's not a big card game fan at all, and she got into that a little bit. She's actually playing that and enjoys it. So, yeah.
Nice. So far, I think I've like went out of the ones that I've played, but we'll see if Pokemon can scratch that itch. I know
Yeah.
Rat's Tail's going to be there commenting and decrying all my horrible plays, I'm sure, tonight. But I guess for our topic, as it turns out, all the Joshes got sick last week.
Yes.
We had a meeting the week before, so we said that all Joshes had to be sick last
Yeah.
Saturday. And there was some very big news, unfortunately, some very sad news.
Yeah.
It has been revealed that three of the major names at the studio who made Disco Elysium, which I've kind of looked that up because I know their name, I just don't know the exact how you pronounce it.
It's Alexander Rostov,
Mhm.
Robert Kurtzwitz, and Helen Hindpeer.
Yep.
And so the lead designer, the writer, and the art director, like the literal heart and soul of like one of the best games
Yep.
ever.
And it's also why I call this episode or our topic is like the soul of a game or the
Yeah.
importance of leads. Is that it has been discovered that they were let go of the company under very unusual circumstances, at least a year it's been.
Yeah.
And no one really knew about this up until last week. And they've also, in like one of those other bits of irony, they announced they're looking for a monetization expert for the next Disco Elysium on their site. And it has caused a lot of uproar from people saying that Disco Elysium is now dead and gone, to other people saying, well, who cares about those three? You know, they didn't do much, to people saying, oh no, it's fine for them to get rid of those people. And it's been one of those very confusing situations. And there's a lot, I think, to unpack from this. And hi, Joe. Hope you're having
Hey,
a
Joe.
great day too. But I guess like the first thing is definitely this discussion about the whole, what is an author? The, who's like the top person when it comes to these projects? Because a lot, and this is something that for a lot of people who grew up learning game design and game development, we've heard all about the horror stories of the rock star developer. The
Yeah.
person who, it's either my way or the highway, how dare you, you don't like this idea or you're not good, how dare you insult my work.
Touch
And
my baby.
exactly. And we've spoken a lot on the show and on a lot of the critical thoughts about the dangers of that mentality. However, when we're talking about here with Disco Elysium, with the idea of the author, is that for games that are very unique, for games that become very driven by their creators, it is important to have that lead there. That there has to be, I think the best analogy, of course, that I've heard is, there has to be a captain steering the boat. There has to
Yes.
be someone there who has an idea of where we're all going by the end of it.
Yeah, like it, captain of the boat, a coach, visionary, however you want to see it. And like it's not it might not even be just one person. Like in
Mm-hmm.
this example, it was like a conglomeration of like these multiple people all together. Like they were like some kind
Consortium
like
or something like that?
consortium
Yeah.
of a couple people, and so they worked together for quite a while. So they worked together, and they developed from the quality of the game, you can tell that they have been working together for a while and developing things together. But yeah, I mean, you definitely kind of like it. You really do kind of need like someone to guide the ship. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going to go. And if everybody's just not sure where the game is headed or whatever, then you can end up with some bad results. And I think sometimes when we're playing games and we're like, man, it just doesn't seem like the vision there seemed like a vision was there and
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't go all the way through. And I think a lot of the times this is one of the main reasons that it happens. There's some darker stuff that we're going to talk about, like capitalism and all kind of things, reasons for that. But yeah, like having a vision that is seen all the way through is just so amazing. I mean, especially like you can see it in this game. It like literally oozes it in every aspect.
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the aspects that I think has really become more apparent with the rise of indie development over the past decade. As anyone who's looked at games in the past 20, 30 years, when we look at a AAA game, we have teams oftentimes in the dozens, if not hundreds. If we're talking
Yeah,
about an Ubisoft, an Activision game, where it's hard to put your finger on, okay, this person is the reason why this feels right, or this is the
yeah,
reason why this game looks good. But when we talk about an independent team, when we're talking about sub 20 teams, even sometimes
yes,
sub 5 teams,
for sure.
every person on that team is a major contributor to that game.
Yeah,
And
like the smaller the team is, the more important each person is, right? So like
mhm,
if I had a team of like three people and if I removed one person, they are contributing a massive amount, right? And like just removing one person can totally change, like destroy the game, or
mhm,
just take things out of it. But anyway, sorry to interrupt, but yeah,
yeah,
the smaller the team, the more important it is.
mhm. And when we're talking about, especially for a uniquely driven project like a Disco Elysium or Celeste, or again, look at something like Stardew Valley, that the person who ran that team, or even in the case of a sole developer, it is, again, we used the term, ironically, don't touch my baby and that kind of thing a few minutes ago, but it is their project. It is their DNA on it. And one of the things that I think we have certainly seen from an indie developers over the past decade is that unique DNA. That somebody creates a game like What the Golf, or a team making a game like Celeste, or Hades, or whatever, and there is a lot of personality there. Like, these aren't games that you could develop in a boardroom.
No.
And that has been, again, one of the major things I talk about when it comes to indie development, that you can make what you want. You are not being held up because a shareholder felt that, having a female lead is too risky, or, maybe this game about Indian mythology isn't going to, sell well with the 8 to 15 demographic.
Yeah, definitely. And that, yeah, that's what we always espouse about the I think that's why like we're such big fans of indie games, is
Mm-hmm.
because the AAA, like you can literally feel the amount of cogs like when you're playing a AAA game. Like a lot of people, you'll be like a soulless like soul is in the title. So when we're playing like AAA games with so many cogs, it can feel very soulless, right? And you can't point to, well, who was responsible for this, or why does it feel this way? Or if this person wasn't there, will it still continue, or would it still work? And like in the case of like this game, like Disco Elysium, I would probably, not a betting man, but I would probably put a good amount of money that if the sequel does come out and it's not going to be like of the same caliber and it's not going to have like the same heart and soul,
Mm-hmm.
that because as I've been looking over the story and like I'm reading some of the passages from the devs and stuff, they were very 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 passionate about every aspect of it. um from of the collective, like they were really really
Mm-hmm.
passionate about this. And so removing passionate people in a small project like that, I mean, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm. And we've seen, like, in, like, AA studios that there are, like, people who become kind of like the faces of it. We look at
Yeah.
Firaxis, Sid Meier, Jake Solomon, Yogo Taro of Nier fame, and of course, someone like Hideo Kojima. And again, like, these are titles, like, there's a difference between someone like a Sid Meier, who he has again famously said that he doesn't really run his games anymore. He takes more of an advisory role. He lets whoever is the lead designer on a project kind of take the captaincy, and he's just kind of there to give advice and help them out. Whereas with someone, and we can look at a lot of like major Japanese developer names. Suda51 would be another big example. What's his name? I always forget the name. The guy who did the Igavanias. I always forget his whole name. But like he would be another example. Hideo Kojima and so on, where these projects have that personality. And I think what you said a few minutes ago about that difference between a game that has a soul versus a game that doesn't. And people, I think today, are more willing to put up with issues. Thank you, Chris. They're more willing to put up with issues if that game has personality to it. And this is something I've said a lot about why there is such a stranglehold on like war games and 4X titles from like Paradox. That if you're the only game in town who's putting out this specific style of game, you can get away with, let's say, having bugs or not being the most refined experience. Again, someone like Hideo Kojima or Yoko Taro, they can do whatever the heck they want, and they will get fans jumping at the bit to try those games out because they know they're not going to find someone else making a game like Death Stranding or another Nier Automata.
Yeah, it's like the flavor, the sauce, the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to find it. Like you can't, again, we'll go back to the boardroom. You can't like have a boardroom come up and be like, we need to get that Hideo Kojima feel, or we need that, right? Like you can't manufacture it. And it comes, it's literally from like their passion, their drive. And so you can't manufacture that out of greed and capitalism. Like it just won't work, right?
Yeah.
And so
And we can see studios bounce back if they lose a major name or a major lead. But it's not something that just happens 2 months after, that person was let go or after one game. It can take years. And a good example of this is Team Ninja. Team Ninja of course, Ninja Gaiden and now Neo fame. During the late 90s and the 2000s, their main name was, I think his name was Tomonobu Irigaki. I think that's how it's pronounced again. I apologize if I butcher that one too badly. And he was very much known as like the eccentric rock star developer. And there were a lot of stories and allegations about sexual harassment and him being just a very horrible to work with. And he was let go, I believe, between Ninja Gaiden 1 and Ninja Gaiden 2. Could have been either 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. I forget when exactly he was let go. And the games suffered. They didn't feel as great. Ninja Gaiden Black is one of the highest rated in that franchise, and a lot of people tend to forget number 2 and number 3. Now, Team Ninja obviously bounced back. Neo was a fantastic game. But that was after, I think, at least a decade, maybe a little bit more than that,
A
of
while.
them having to kind of restructure themselves. And this is, again, I think, one of those aspects about when we talk about like the soul of a game or the soul of a studio. That when you lose it, you have to find another way. You cannot just keep going without that person. And again, it's something that we've said. I think this was another one of the comments that was brought up about how there's a difference between you following another style because you played a lot of those games or you work with that person and you literally being that person who created, who has that vision in their head for where this could go 1, 5, 15 games or books or movies or whatever down the line.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's not even just like about even the vision, right? It's just like the person themselves and like they're what they're able to see and like what they
Mm-hmm.
bring to the table. So like it could be like any game that they're working on, right? The sequel or whatever, and they can still bring that same thing to any type of to their game that they're working on. So
Yep. And this is why we say, or this is why there's been a lot of calls for having game dev unions to
yes,
protect people like this and to make sure that we're not burning the candle at both ends and, killing the golden goose just to get one game done when people can have multiple games. And like you just said, it's not just about saying, oh, this person will make nothing but first person shooters for the next 50 years. It's about having that style and that sense of personality. Another shining example of this would be New Blood. New Blood has, gone above and beyond over the past 5 years in terms of Dusk, Ultra Kill, how much impact, their social media and the wacky presence they have. They've become their own little collective of a bunch of cool people making the cool stuff that they want to make. And like we said, it resonates that when David Ziminski made some kind of crazy tweet or a troll post on Twitter, people notice it. When they post a screenshot or some wacky GIF from Gloomwood or Ultra Kill, everyone gets excited about it. And I think more importantly, everybody wants to work with them. Like
yeah.
Dave Austria has said that they've had to stop doing publishing because they're trying to get their own projects out of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And like Chris brought up a good point. Like, the personality goes a long way because like
Mm-hmm.
you like if somebody says here's another Hideo Kojima game, I say Hideo, like
Mm-hmm.
people are gonna look at it, right? Here's another, I don't know,
Sid Meier or
Meyer
Yoko
game.
Taro. Yeah.
That's it. That's all you need to get people are like, okay, there's his vision, there's his idea, and regardless, even if this person isn't in the lead, like they're going to have that guidance and that vision, right? And so, I mean, people will follow that, and it's really good for indies. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People love following the stories, following. Okay, they worked on this game, they're going here. So about the human element, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
people are really being more attracted to that now than like the corporate element. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can't really like get cozy and hug a giant corporation, but you but you can understand a human solo team, 5 people. You can understand their struggle and you can understand what they're going through and watch their growth and then be a part of that. And that is worth so much, right?
Yeah. Although I think you may be wrong about all the Call of Duty fans in terms of hugging a franchise and a major studio.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah, and to Chris's comment, and that again is kind of the dark side what we talk about when it comes to like the soul and the person in control. That if that person becomes the sole arbiter of the game, when it becomes, it's not as we said, like there's that fine line between your personality or your philosophy guiding the game and you kind of ruling the game with an iron fist. That is a very different story. I think that's why a lot of people, when we say like the auteur developer and the rockstar developer, they immediately sneer, like, oh my
Yeah.
god, we don't need, people like that. And again, it's a very tough line to walk. There's a difference between, again, say a Sid Meier and Hideo Kojima and Yoko Taro, and having that one person who's like, you must do it this way, and you dare to question, what I'm doing. And with the Disco Elysium story, again, I also want to elaborate or clarify that it's still ongoing, as we are
Yeah.
talking about right here. So there's been mixed reports. Some say that they're horrible to work with. Some say that this was, an unceremonious firing. It's still very much up in the air as of this time.
Yeah, I was digging and digging trying to find information, and it's so hard to clarify with the NDAs and everything like that. And I'm sure once we find out everything, there's going to be some lessons, and we might have to revisit this and talk about uh, maybe possibly what happened and what indie devs can do to
Mm-hmm.
protect themselves from this. Because I know the thing is like, um, I have a slight feeling that there's a lot of like cash grabs involved, or just some
Mm-hmm.
time capitalist intent. But the thing is that we need to be aware of like protections, right? Because of when you're working, because this is a predator. Okay, let me restart. This is a really big industry, right? So there's going to be sharks. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people that are going to be preying on game developers that are very passionate, that are not very business savvy, right? So the main important part, I think we're going to need to look back at is probably the business aspects of this. So what actually happened?
Mm-hmm.
Because these people like literally were the heart and soul of this game, uh, created a ton of it, and now they nothing, right? They're not a part of it anymore. They didn't leave. They still have their skills and their talent and everything like that, but they're not able to like fully work on their child, their baby, whatever
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it. And so I think there's got a lot of lessons when we can find out what happens, what did really happen. We can go back and analyze it, and hopefully we can discuss that. And because there's a lot of really important things there about the business side that we need to like be aware of. It's like unions and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, etc. Contracts, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I have lots, a lot of game developers and like, hey, I got this publisher is coming up to me, and predatory publisher contracts, take the IP, you get nothing, and this and that, and some people are very hungry, and just to get that little capital to keep working on it, they'll be like, yeah, okay, I'll do it, and they take it, and then something really bad will happen, to your passion and your project, and you can just lose your everything from that, like your desire to work in the industry, get burnt out, and never want to do it again, and become bitter, and instead of being that amazing auteur that you could be.
Yep. And as another bit of a story there is the publisher, I think they're called PQ, that was found now that they were taking funds from developers that were supposed to, they receive like scholarships from like grants, being like in smaller underdeveloped countries, and they were not giving them that money. And it
Yeah.
actually led to one of the games I was looking forward to, whose I can't remember the exact name of it, but this was one of those. It was an adventure game that looked really fantastic, and the developer says that it's now on indefinite hold because they don't have the funding.
Was it that one that was it was in development for like 3 years, and then
Yeah,
they cut their funding on it?
something like that. I think it's from an
Yeah.
Indonesian developer or
Yes, yes,
something along those lines. Yeah,
yeah,
and yeah, like as you said, like there are a lot of horror stories of publishers and capitalism coming in to mess with game development. And for every good story you hear of a publisher, there are probably several dozen more in
more,
terms of this
way
publisher
more,
did nothing.
and they can't
Or,
say anything because of NDAs.
hmm I mean, how many games have I played and I've looked at that? It's a great game, and we see it has like less than 100 reviews on Steam, even less than 50 reviews. And I'm just sitting there going, what did the publisher do? The only this publisher did was make a store page, and that's it.
Yeah,
Because if that's all they did, that is not worth a publisher.
yeah. Yeah, marketing and like Ratstail said, marketers too. Like, I mean, constantly get solicited by predatory marketing, predatory publishers, and again, like we as this is a very passion driven um, field. I guess you can say a lot of us are marks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
easy to fall victim for it. So, yeah, just we need to be aware of that.
And again, like if someone comes up to and says, hey, I'll fund your entire project. All you have to do is sign this 50-page contract. A lot of people will say,
Yeah.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
fund my entire game. Why the heck
Well,
not?
why not? What could go wrong?
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a whole lot can. And it is to your point about like business skills and management skills. It's one of the reasons why a lot of that stuff is both very underrated and also just very crucial for
Yeah.
a studio to survive. Because
Yeah.
again, like if you just finish a game by like the skin of your teeth, you barely got it done. That can be a huge problem when you're trying to make your next game. Or the one after that, or what if you took a bad deal because you didn't know any better? And now, let's say you don't even own your own property anymore.
Yeah.
And like one of the more like horrific points about this whole Disco Elysium things, I think they said that one of the developers may have ended up in a mental hospital because of
Yes.
the stress and the loss of this.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, even me myself, like and basically every dev that I know, we do take this very personally and we take it to heart. And a lot of us can face like mental issues and things like that, and it's like something that you worked like your whole life for, right? A lot of us, like, we were like, first time we touched a controller, that was like, I am gonna make, that's all I'm gonna do, that's all I want to do is make video games, and this is my only goal. And so a lot of us have been working to this goal for our entire lives, or regardless. And so like when that happens, it could be like, oh my gosh, so detrimental. And like, yeah, a lot of mental health issues. I think we maybe would have, I don't know how we could touch on that later in a podcast, but definitely it's a very important aspect that I think that we should discuss more and be more open about it, about the
Mm,
mental health aspects of it, because it is kind of like a profession where we kind of stuff ourselves in a room and we kind of are, we're just with ourselves in Discord, and
mm,
it's sometimes it's kind of solitary work, even if we're on the Slack and Trello and talking to each other, or a Discording, it still is a solitary kind of work. And so like, yeah, the mental stress, definitely, like that's very, end up with people in mental institutions because
mm.
like you've lost something so very important to you. Again, you're a baby, right?
Yep.
So
And to
no
Chris'
one puts baby
comment,
in the corner.
yeah. To what Chris said about Cave Story, yes, the developer of that lost the right
Are
to
you
the game.
kidding me?
Yeah, and the indie publisher Nicholas, I think they're called. There's also a lot of horror stories around them that I've
I did
heard.
not know about that cave story. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yep. He does not have the Nicholas. Yeah, they do not have. He does not have the rights to Cave Story anymore.
Jeez. That's like one of, wow. And
Yeah.
that, to me, Cave Story is like, was one of those games. I love Cave Story so much. And like the story about it, I think he worked on it. He had a job and he worked on it after
Mm-hmm.
work for years and years and years. And yeah, wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, to Toponia, they also did the Biome Isaac remakes, or whatever how we call it. Yeah, so it is a very scary aspect of game development. That what happens when you lose that project, or when something comes and takes the rug right from out from under you.
Yeah.
And it's one of
Yeah.
those things that I know we've spoken about this before about the challenge of success.
Yeah.
When everyone is buddy buddy and you're just working in your spare time, nobody's really caring or managing the hours or contributions. But then let's say your game does blow up. Let's say Northern Lion or PewDiePie plays it and it gets featured on Game of the Year awards, and now that little project is now a business venture. What do you do? What
Yep.
if someone comes in and says, "Hey, we would like to finance your next game. How's $30 million sound for you and your 5 people?"
Yeah.
Again, just read this contract.
Yeah. See, and the thing is that that's what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are in the business, right? And you are not, and you should be, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't, you just need to know, like, we discussed this, like, to continue doing it, like the business aspect is so important. And I know a lot of us are like, no, I don't want to do it. Marketing so hard, business is so hard. But in order to protect yourself, right? In order to protect your work, it's like source control. It's like backup. It's just protection for your work. And so even having a modicum of business acumen, marketing acumen will go a long way. And I don't recommend just having a modicum. I recommend studying as much as you can, um, and just to protect yourself, because these things will happen and they will continue to happen. Just like Josh said, there'll be like one success, and for every like one, there's 1,000, not 1,000, but a whole bunch, probably thousands now, right? Probably thousands of other ones that are getting screwed over through contracts and losing IPs and losing their work, and many of them are not even able to talk about it because of NDAs. Just like we didn't find about this till a year later because of NDAs, and they're still beholden to some NDAs. I was looking at was it Michael Lugia? I want to butcher his name. But yeah, he still can't fully discuss like everything about the situation for Disco Elysium. And so, he might have signed some really hardcore NDA, and they're just like, yeah, I just want to get this out the door. We don't know yet. And and then now you can't even touch it. Never give portions of your IP away. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's an IP, and that's one of the most important things that you have in the game, where it's your game. It's not your quote, it's the game, it's your IP. So your intellectual property is very important. So yeah, I wouldn't want to give my IP away at all.
And again, you just don't know how these things are going to pan out months, years,
Yeah.
whatever down the line. And it is tough, like you said, when it comes to the business management side of knowing this stuff. A lot of people, as we are very well aware of, get in the game industry not because of wanting to do business meetings and read
Right.
contracts and do social media. But again, as you grow, this is something you really need to pay attention to. Because some developers can get away with just not really doing a lot. Again, like the Five Nights at Freddy's developer, Scott Cawthon, when that game blew up, it became a license to print money. He got all these offers. I'm sure he either had a lawyer or had some kind of background in terms of negotiating this kind of stuff. And it worked out fantastically well up until when he got into trouble with the controversy last year. But again, there are developers out there who, if one day your game goes from selling 5 copies to 6.5 million copies, and all of a sudden you have publishers sending you emails saying, you want to work with us, we want to finance your next game, you come work with us, they're going to just sit there and go, what the heck do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, and so that's a point where if you don't have the expertise, you need to reach out and find someone who has that expertise. I know I was they were talking about, people when they're founding studios, you need to have someone that complements what you don't have, right? So if you're founding a studio, maybe you're not good at business, co-found it with someone who's really good at business, right? Or something, but be ready and be prepared. Have a plan, right? You definitely need to have a plan for what are you going to do. So it took my game, I speak despite an NDA. I don't know. I think the NDA means you're going to get in some big trouble if you talk, because I noticed that most people don't break NDAs at all.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting today is that there's definitely a lot more in terms of public reach. And I think the whole, public outcry aspect of this, or the public reception, has, I think, become a major factor. Again, like 20, 30 years ago, it was very hard to get this information out there.
Yeah.
Today, all you need is a Twitter account, all you need is a YouTube channel, and if you can, back up the receipts of what you're saying, word will spread, like a wildfire. Thank you, Pony, for that one.
Yeah.
Game
I
Jam
wonder
Jail.
Game Jam in jail.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what kind of computers they have in there. Hopefully, they have good GPUs.
Mm-hmm. They'll have that new Nvidia one, like the car that's like
Yeah,
bigger than the tower. That's in all the prisons these days,
yeah,
right?
yeah. All of them. Well, they all have them now.
And one of the things I just found, Jail Jam,
Jail
exactly.
Jam, Jail Jam.
There you go. There's our idea of the week.
Yep, there is. We haven't had it. Yeah, so we were gonna have to come up with a couple because we missed last one. So a few
Yeah.
more.
Mm-hmm. The one thing, like, to go back to Disco Elysium that I find just, like, very depressing about the situation is when a lot of the people at the studio who are still working there are talking about it, like, no one seems to be acknowledging the contribution of the three people who were let go. Again, you had your lead designer, your lead writer, and your lead artist.
Art. Yeah,
Like, those three things are kind of like the foundation of Disco Elysium right there.
it's like it. That's it.
And I just found just like very depressing, like how like someone was like saying, "Oh, it's only like 18% of the company was let go," and who cares about that? And like I could just feel like the vein in my head starting to like pulse as I was reading that,
Yeah, yeah,
because again, like this kind of gets at what we were saying in the first part of this, that thank you, Chris. I think we just got a new Netflix show right there. I think we figured it out.
yes, we did. That's a new Netflix show, Josh.
All right, we
We're
gotta pitch
branching
this.
out.
Yeah. All right, someone get Netflix on the phone. We gotta show the pitch them there. But back on topic there. But again, like as we talked about, when it comes to the importance of leads to the people who actually develop these concepts, they are, I think, worth more than just the sum of their parts or the sum of their
Yeah,
skills.
yeah, yeah. Like, I don't know what would like. This is just like Corey Barlog is just the first one, but what would like the new God of Wars be without Corey
Mm-hmm.
Barlog like at the helm?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it, yeah, and I think it's just like everyone's misunderstanding of game dev, right? And and
Mm-hmm.
and I think on the last podcast I was talking about this. I wish that that we are able to for the investors to understand more about how game development works, and for the consumers to understand how it works. And it's like you're not just taking out like, oh, we're not saving, I don't know how much their salaries are. Oh, we're saving 300K or whatever
Mm-hmm.
per person or whatever. And so it's not that much. And it's just three people. And but what they contributed, like how does a human body work without a heart and a soul, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
how can it keep going? Like it wouldn't work. And so like in Disco Elysium, I'm not a betting man again, but I guarantee you it wouldn't be what it was or what it is without them. Um,
And I think, like, to that point, especially about misunderstanding what game development is. Like we've used like car analogies, housing analogies a lot of times here, and I think a lot of people look at a video game as a collection of car parts. That you know, who cares about the steering wheel? I can put hundreds of steering wheels in. Oh, if this engine doesn't work, I'll trade it or I'll get a new one. And yes, there are, and again, for any like classic car people somehow watching the stream, there are people who want original pieces and stuff like that. But we're talking about for the
yeah,
consumer. The consumer doesn't care if the engine model number is exactly, to spec of this car or
right.
whatever. They care, they get in, it starts, they go where they want, they come back, car, gets shut off.
Mhm.
But game development is not the same as that. And like you said, like if the heart and the soul is gone, what else is driving that? And to go back to like Firax's example, like with Jake Solomon, again, like the original like XCOM Enemy Unknown, like that was very much his baby. That was his project that he wanted to do for Firaxis. So if again, let's say Firaxis decides, who knows, whenever, that there'll be an XCOM 3. And let's say that either Jake Solomon doesn't won't work on anymore, he's not a part of the team, maybe he moved on to another studio, and they go ahead and do another one there. You can look at the previous game as a blueprint, as we've said. If you've played a platformer and you say, well, I want to make a platformer now, you can look at those games. But there's a very big difference between looking at it or even, working alongside the person.
Yeah.
And being that person who made those decisions. Who, when people play some of these games, they will take certain aspects and they will commit it to stone. That is a commandment. But it's hard to understand why somebody did something like that. Why did, in XCOM, they went to action points instead of time units? Again, if you're just making another game in that series, you don't question that. But if, you were the first person, or if, in Jake Solomon's case, he did a lot of time to try and figure out how he wanted those systems to be. The same goes for something like Disco Elysium. Yes, you can say to another team, go make Disco Elysium. And they'll play it and they'll do it together. But is it really going to be as forward-thinking or as inventive as that game? Probably not.
Probably not. And yeah, you can say, hey, here we go. Here's the blueprint. Here, and just do a facsimile. Sure, you can do that. But like, if we go back to the car analogy again, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to look at the car. This engine is 3.5 cubic inches, right? And it's like, and the car weighs this much. So, okay, we'll do that. But why is the engine that size? Or why is the car that heavy, right?
Why did they do these things?
Why did they do these things, right? And those things are very important, right? Like, I mean, if something as simple as platforming, it's like, why does the jump feel this way? Or some right, simple as platforming. Why does the jump feel this way? Or why does what was the decision for the health to work this way? All those things, like, just can't, you can copy it, but it won't be the same, right? You have to know why it was made that way originally, instead of in just looking at a finished project. It's a lot harder to break it down in that respect.
Yep. And it's even harder when you then say, well, how do we iterate on this? If we don't have the original person or their original thought process, where do we take this? And what happened? Well, look at Resident Evil. When Shinji Mikami left, I believe after Resident Evil 4, I think he left maybe sometime around Resident Evil 5, the series kind of went rudderless for a very long time.
Sure did.
And again, you can tell a team, just keep working, just doing the same thing over and over again. But as we've seen, people don't want to just play the same game 15, 20, 50 times. And to Pony's talking about, please the machine spirit, I think this again gets back at that heart of the capitalism problem. That AAA publishers and studios, they want that machine. They want to say that every year there's going to be another Madden or another Call of Duty. But for franchises that are very unique, you can't just say, go make 5 Disco Elysium games or 5 spin-off Disco Elysium games. I want each one out every quarter. It doesn't work like that from a creative standpoint.
Like Chris is saying right there, the chefs versus cooks. So, okay, we could even like take it to baking, for example. So like, for a baker has to understand, I don't know which ingredients go with what, and I'm trying to make this delicious cake or whatever, and I have to keep testing it, and I have to know all these things. And just for example, the person that was testing it and doing these various things to get to that outcome, to realize, okay, I need these many action points for this many things, and etc. There's like all kind of things that go underneath it, but beneath it, and it requires creativity, teamwork, and all those things together before you get to that final product. And so, okay, someone can eat the cake and be like, it's delicious. I get that it's delicious, but they don't understand everything else that went into like the trial and error and how they arrived at that point.
It's that, yep. And to Chris' comment, it's that difference between creating the recipe and following a recipe.
Right.
And there are developers out there who can follow a recipe really well. That
Oh
if
yeah.
they played a lot of first person shooters or they played a lot of horror games, whatever, they can follow that formula to a T. But it's that difference between saying, well, what if I want to create a new kind of horror game or a new
Yes.
kind of first person shooter? That takes foresight. It takes having that person who is steering things to say that, yes, I know first person shooters do this, this, and this, but why don't we try this, this, and this? And sometimes you can get that with a collective of people. That you can have people who are all on that same wavelength, like something like
Mhm.
with New Blood.
Yeah.
But, and again, but to that point, that's not something you can really commoditize. You
No.
can't just say, you five people go in this room, become the best of friends, and make the next $10 billion video game together.
Also, like another fact here is like, okay, so we're talking about a team, right? Or like, I don't know how big Zone Studio was, but like, there's like morale, and there's like team spirit, and and working together, and so like when you're a team and you're building a game together, and you know, okay, I can depend on this person for this, or we can depend on this person for this. And when you start like what they did here, like in the sake of capitalism, like removing very key people, what are other the people underneath? How do they feel? Like, do they feel secure in their job? Are they going to give their best heart and soul? Like, whatever is
Mm-hmm.
left of the heart and soul of that studio, are they going to be like, yeah, I'm definitely going to get everything I have now for this game because I know I'm going to get let go
Mm-hmm.
also. Like, what's going to happen to them, right? So like in the pursuit of capitalism, they're destroying the team, like, and I guess you can again, you can always get 5 more people, 10 more people, and throw them in a room and say follow the recipe and do it, which you can. But again, you're not going to come up with another Disco Elysium like disco, right? You just can't do it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Capitalism ho. Yes.
I'm happy someone said that comment during the discussion today. Yeah, and again, it's that difference between, and something that we've said many times over, it's that difference between willing a game concept into being that first person, that, that singular voice that said, you know what, I want to make a platforming racing dating sim game, versus being, the 10, 20, 50 other people are saying, hey, I played that platforming racing visual novel game, I want to make my own version of that, or I want to make another game like it. And yes, you can see some cases where developers will go above and beyond that original idea, but it never, I think, resonates as much to the consumer as the very first FTL, Shovel Knight, Darkest Dungeon, and so on, Disco Elysium.
Yeah, definitely. um Yeah, and like Pony's saying, like the problem isn't that the business side exists. Like, I mean, the and it's not really like about that they want to mix with the creatives. I don't think it's that they don't understand
Mm-hmm.
how video game they I believe they look at it as more like as a factory type process with when this is like almost the opposite of a factory type process. And when you try to implement like factory type process and cog processes, that's when you lose the heart and soul, and it just doesn't resonate in the same way, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
um you know what I mean? I really think that's more the issue, is that there really is the lack of understanding of how games are made and how the iteration process works, how the creativity works, and how important the creatives are to it, right? And the leaders and the captains of the boat are.
Yep, and I think to your point about like the process, video games are not held to the same kind of development process as any other kind of good. It's like
No.
saying, what's your time frame on art? How long will it take you to make an art? And somewhere an artist is just like clutching their heart in pain. as I said, those
their carpal tunnel can't even clutch their heart.
yeah. And again, with game development, we can, commoditize, programming. We can say, okay, 5,000 lines of code. How long will it take for you to put this in a computer? But again, that's a difference between saying, okay, how long will it take you to figure out the exact combat system you want in this first-person shooter? How long will it take you to balance cards in a deck builder?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the iterative process of game, and it's like the more iteration you can do, the more it's just it's really hard to put like you can guesstimate. You can say, okay, we're gonna hope. We want to get, like we've gone over this before. You don't want to work too long on certain things. That means you're putting a round peg in a square hole or whatever. Will it fit? I think it fit. But it just the process alone. Sorry, I lost my thought there. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm looking at the whipped cream pizza.
Whipped cream, yeah, that's what threw me off.
And again, like, it's that challenge of when you throw game design in. I still remember that interview I did with a developer of a Bit Shifter from a few years ago, and they said that game design is very much a combination of entertainment and programming.
Yeah.
That, yes, the programming side is a hard science. It is a very technical, very exact thing you need to do. Again, you type the wrong letter or the wrong symbol in on your code, all hell will break loose. But game design, game feel, is a very amorphous kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like we've said, it's very easy to say, make a platformer, make a first-person shooter, make a deck builder, whatever. But to understand what makes a good version of those games is a very different process. Yeah. And it's why a lot of people, I think, tend to underestimate the amount of work and challenge that goes into making these games, as my voice is dying.
See, so like, again, like okay, so like there's people that come from like, I don't know, like bank development software, and they're like, hey, why isn't your pipeline the same as our bank development software? And it's like, because it's not the same, right? Like or even like, okay, for example, like a movie or VFX or like or a book well, I don't know about a book, but like because I don't write books, just you're the one. But like there's always like a simple start and a finish, like usually for like most of these things, like other types of things, like and for a game, like you said, everything is very amorphous. Even actually like the programming itself, like Ratstyle brought up, like a lot of the like solving programming, a lot of it is there's creativity in solving a lot of like, how do I solve this? How do I make this more efficient, more memory efficient? How can I expand it? How can it work later in later games? How can I make this code base work for other stuff? And so there's a whole bunch of things, of course, in programming that are creative, right?
And I mean,
but
like consumer, like a lot of consumers do not understand the programming side. They think as long as a game, you pick it up, you turn on, it works, that the game is 100%, code perfection, and there's no bugs. You did everything 100% right. And again, I am just causing seizures and aneurysms to all the programmers. Watch, programmers and artists are going to hate me after this video.
Once it's done, once the pro code it's perfect. Once it's working, it was perfect.
Right, but programmers, you did everything first try. Remember, like hardcore programming, you did all first try. It was perfect, and then you threw the computer out.
That's right. But see, like, okay, and so like we changed something about the I don't know, something about how the dialogue works, right? So that means we're gonna need to change something about how the code references the dialogue, and then oh no, well we need to change how the character's animated. Now we're gonna use some kind of different IK rig, or we're gonna use a different IK retargeting. So everything needs to change. And well, you know what? The combat doesn't feel right anymore. So now we need to adjust this, and then everything else has to, okay, oh, now the art's not right anymore. So now let's do, so it's so iterative, so amorphous and so iterative it's really hard to put a cap. Like you do need to put a cap and say, okay, we can't be working on this for 10 years. Like we always say, don't work on your first game for 10 years. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I guess unless you're Rockstar, I don't know. But those are different things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just really hard to say, okay, this is nearly impossible. I think it's almost nearly impossible. You can have a guesstimate, and here's the thing: even if you're making a platformer and you're making whatever you're making, it's the only one of that kind. Like your game is the only one that is made like that, right? Like every other game will be programmed a little bit different. It'll be things will be implemented a little bit different because there's so many different ways that you can approach game design, game development. Everything can be approached differently. The way you do your sound, the way you do your art, the way everything is referenced, everything can be done so differently. So saying that you're going to have a streamlined pipeline that is this way, it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, so the misunderstanding about how games are made is definitely one of the big issues. So I think they're, like they can be like, oh, well, the game's not done in time. They're not productive. They didn't finish this in time. So fire them. It wasn't productive when really they're iterating and they were probably maybe the best ones working on it, right? Those things happen all the time.
Yep. And a lot of people, again, don't understand how much time it takes to do something creative. Again, if you say cut a tree down, well, you have a pretty good idea how long it's going to take for you to use your tools and cut that tree down.
Mhm.
You tell someone write a novel, that's a different story. And like you said, every game's development or every game development is different. And we see a lot of consumers again where that little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Where they say, oh well, this studio made their platformer in, 3 years. Why are you up to 5 years with yours? Or hey, this
Yeah.
group made this entire procedurally generated space sim in a year and a half. How long does it take for you to make yours?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And so yeah, that's a really good point, Josh. Like, because one game, for example, was this procedurally generated space farming game was made in like 6 months does not mean that you can make another one in that same amount of time. It's just it doesn't what's the word? It doesn't match up. The V
Mm-hmm.
Rising one, yeah, only V Rising trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just writing time down where. Yeah, thank you, Chris. There's my chest pain for the episode right there.
You're just
I'll
typing and writing words. What do you gotta do? What else you gotta do?
just type the same word over and over
Over and over
again.
again.
That never came back to cause someone to go crazy, right?
I
Yeah.
think there was I don't know if anyone watched School Time, but there was this one episode where he had to like write an essay and he
Mm-hmm.
was just, and he was there for like 4 or 5 hours and he just wrote the word the over and over again. Anyway, I don't think anybody watched this. Aging myself here.
Monkeys on typewriter. Yep, exactly, Pony.
Yeah, monkey on typewriter.
I think a lot of people view game development as, how many monkeys does it take to make a Mario game or make a Final
Yeah.
Fantasy? And, if the formula has already been established, why does it take so long to make another game or to do something else in that space?
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, that's a good one. Also, like my favorite one is Corey. Again, Corey Barlog mentions it. You're building
Mhm.
you're building a spaceship and it's taking off while you're building it, right? So you're building, you don't even know what the spaceship is going to look like, where it's going to go, what color it's going to be, what it's going to do, and you're building it while it's launching.
Yeah. And again, just because a studio produced one amazing game doesn't mean that they're going to produce 5, 10 equally amazing or even better games. I think that's another aspect of the capitalism side. It's why we see that pursuit of sequels and branding and licensing the IP, that you want to keep a sure bet going. And like we said, if your first game sold 500,000 copies, let's say, a lot of people will assume, well, that means game number 2 could sell at least 500,000 copies, maybe more.
Mhm.
But as we've also said, that doesn't one doesn't always translate to the other. Let's say 200,000 people who played your game hated. Let's say they bought it and said, "Oh my god, this is horrible." Refund, or they say, "You know what? Yeah, I
Yeah.
played it, but I don't care anymore about it." So now, let's say you're down to 300,000 guaranteed sales, but you're going to design your game thinking you'll get at least 700,000 or a million. What happens then? And what happens when, like, we saw, like, EA with Dead Space? They say, you know what, your last game sold 1.8 million copies. Can your sequel sell 5 million or 10 million in the first month?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just throw in all the stuff Call of Duty does and you'll be fine.
Fine, no worries. Just do what this is what Call of Duty's doing. Just put it in Dead Space. So get rid of that spooky stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's a very big stinger when it came to the horror genre. Because a lot of people, and this is something I wrote about in the horror design book, a lot of people were expecting horror to turn into a Halo or to a Call of Duty. That, you know, even the most successful horror game at that time was maybe only bringing in like 1.8 million copies sold, maybe 2 million. And that could have been after years. Like, we're talking like Resident Evil 4 numbers. But the publishers wanted these games to have that same impact. They wanted their own Call of Duty. They wanted their own Madden. And franchises, and this gets back to that understanding of what game development is. Not every franchise is designed to be a 10 million copy selling winner. Sometimes even just getting 100,000 copies could be more than what anyone expected.
Yeah, definitely. I think like, you know, wanting a game to perform so much, right? Like, it's, you know, especially for sequels and stuff like that, is definitely like the opposite of what, like, yeah, you want your game to perform good, but like, just getting a game out there and a good quality game without putting the constraints of it has to make this much or it has to do this much. And that's what happens when you get games and they start tacking on things to try and like add revenue and things like that. I think instead, you know, not think instead it should be about the quality of, because it's an art, right? Like, it's magic, and you can't really, sadly, you can't really it's priceless, kind of like. And to ask for, okay, well, it is worth this much and it has to be worth this much, I think is kind of like the opposite of what like the true nature of it is. Yes, it is a business, but you cannot expect, like, of course, the sequel is going to do double what the first one did. It doesn't work like that.
And if you just add, you know, loot boxes or gotchas or whatever, your game will just magically gain extra 5 million copies.
Yeah, when the reason they were playing the first one was because there was no gotchas and there was no, you know, none of those things in there. It was a much simpler game. And once capitalism took over, it got its fingers in it and changed it for the worse.
Yeah. And like I said, there is a finite number of fans for any project. Again, the dream that you're going to release that game that everybody in the known world is going to buy, it's just not going to happen. No matter what, you know, people say about like The Last of Us 2 or God of War or whatever, there are going to be people who don't care about that game, who are not part of that intended fan base. And no matter what you do, you're not going to change that. And again, like something like with Disco Elysium being so, you know, personality driven in that respect, that you lose that, when you lose that personality, what are you left with? Like, what's left of a game when the creative leads and the people who made that world are gone? Yes, you can, you know, work in that. And I'm sure, again, they're working on a Disco Elysium 2 as we speak, no matter who's a part of that project.
Yeah.
But what is it going to be compared to that first game?
Yeah. it's gonna be just an empty shell of what it was. I was reading some, and the devs were saying that they did get some stuff, like they were working on it, and it was shaping up to kind of the vision that they were hoping for the second one. But
Mhm.
if they're not there to get the ship to the destination and make sure that everything's there, then it won't be the same. It will pale in comparison to it. And then also now you have all this bad press
Mhm.
for people that really for the consumers that are really more tapped into it and understand like the human element of game development and stuff like that. They're gonna be like, I probably won't play the second one just for that reason. um
Or
I
they'll
mean,
pirate it too.
yeah, our pirate, yeah, definitely. Yeah, maybe I'll do that instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and I think this again is that double-edged nature of this, that Disco Elysium and a lot of indie games, they're not, corporate hundreds of thousands of employees working on these projects. They are very personality driven. Like
Yeah,
Metal Gear, I think, is another big example of that. When Hideo Kojima left, or completely
yeah,
torn, the bridge was burned to the ground between him and
jeez,
Konami. They
yeah.
tried to make a new Metal Gear game. They did that Metal Gear, was it Survive or Metal Gear
Survive.
Rise? Something like
Yeah,
that. And not only do you have the people who are the fans saying, I'm not going to buy this game, but then the people who did buy this game go, what the hell is this? It feels nothing like the previous games. And I think that's another very important point. Like, this is not about attacking the individual people who are making these projects. It's not about attacking the programmers and the people who had to, put this thing together. This is about attacking the leads and the decision makers who said, we want to make a game, and we don't want, any blueprint of the person who made that game in the first place.
yeah, definitely. Trying to see which Metal Gear that was.
I don't think it's
Vengeance.
even like available for purchase anymore.
Yeah, you can't even get it anymore. I don't think so.
Yeah. And again, like to Chris's comment, especially when it comes to independent games, people don't forget. They don't forget the good stuff, and they don't forget the bad stuff. Especially, they don't. Thank you, Metal Gear Survive. Yeah, that's the one.
Metal Gear Survive. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They do not forget the bad stuff that happens over a project.
Well, I forgot what happened with Obelix. I forgot that one.
That was the developer that they went to Epic, and they were kind of like teasing and like making
Ah,
fun of people over them choosing
yes,
Epic.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
It's still on Steam.
It's still
See.
on Steam.
Yep, there
Yeah,
it is. Metal Gear Survive for $30. Yes, I want to spend
wow.
$30 on that game.
Mm. I should try it out and see how the feel is. I don't think I'll read a review or a video instead. Yep.
And I think I'm just about out of points. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we didn't cover yet.
Mm. I did see a quote. I just want to read that, or someone a comment, and someone said that the game proved itself right. The pursuit of capitalism destroys art, culture, life, and everything around it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I found that quote quite funny when I was, or quite apropos when I was doing that. Another quote I found was this is from Iron Pineapple. Said so heartbreaking. Disco Elysium developers were pushed out of the company, likely due to investor greed. It is painfully ironic, given the content of the game, while that it is the reviews for the devs who created one of the best pieces of art in gaming. So
Yep.
I
It,
I go ahead.
I was gonna say, and yet, and again, like this is the stuff that becomes like the albatross around the neck for a
Yeah,
studio.
yeah, yeah.
And I think someone said that it would be like the ultimate irony if this is just like all like some kind of giant performance art. That secretly everything is fine. This is just like a 6-dimensional chess of, showing, capitalism will
Wow.
ruin the game, but no, it didn't. It's all fine. That is super
Wow.
optimism right there.
Wow. I don't but then if they really did that, then the devs wouldn't I mean, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
really cool with those devs anymore.
Yeah, like it still seems like no matter how you say that. And
Yeah. Interesting though. Interesting theory.
interesting theory for sure. And again, this is where we kind of talk about the importance of understanding game design. And again, the importance of having a lead. That there's a difference between saying, well, everyone has equal say over this project, versus again having that one or even a few people who are
Few
like,
people.
you know, this is our vision. This is what we want to see this game become. And again, this does not mean you shut down all criticism, all feedback, etc. It's about having that understanding of what does the finish line look like? What is this game going to be like when everything is said and done? Because you
Yeah.
can have people who will work on a game and they'll do everything that you say, but that doesn't mean that they could necessarily then go around and say, okay, now create a brand new one. Now,
Yeah.
do it all again from scratch and make something entirely original.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't have too much to say. It's sad. It's very,
Mm-hmm.
very sad. This is, I mean, Disco Elite. I mean, everybody in this and that's watching or will watch later will definitely agree that Disco Elysium was like one of the best games, like recently that I can ever imagine. I was just before this. I was like looking over. I was watching a video and just looking at the dialogue and like I was like so blown, like like we're just watching the writing and looking at the art style, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just so amazing. But like again, man, creatives and the heart and soul, the creatives are the heart and soul of this, and it's just very sad. That I don't know what else to say, man.
Yep. And again, they're like, I guess the only maybe silver lining would be if those three developers now do a Kickstarter or they
Yes.
get together and they make another project.
Yeah, actually, under one of the devs' tweets, he was tweeting about it, and there was like some and Kickstarter investor, and they said you start a Kickstarter and we'll fund you, like everybody will fund you. So I mean, I'm pretty sure they're going to start working on something else, but I think it's just a setback for them, and I'm pretty sure they
Yeah.
will recover and they will figure get through it. But man, it just really hurts when you don't have now they don't have their IP anymore and they can't
Mm-hmm.
that was an amazing universe and world that like had so much like more that you could
Yeah.
explore with it, right, Josh? I mean,
And again, like that's another very hard thing to quantify. What is the extent that universe could tell in terms
yeah,
of storytelling? And
yeah,
I think Pony's coming from earlier, it is very much that example of short term greed versus
short-term greed,
long term profit and long term
yeah,
investment.
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
like I know they're working on like a TV show and a
TV show.
adaptation.
Yeah, and in the TV show when they announced it, the writer that they fired, she was going to be writing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how is it even gonna have, like, it's gonna be, I can't imagine how that'll be. I mean, I'm sure someone could interpret it and it might come out okay, but I mean, just imagine how much better it would be when the heart and soul is there and you could see just
Yep.
everything laid on the line and this is it. This is what, like it would just be amazing. Just like, I don't know, but there's just a much better chance that it would be.
Yeah. And like we said, the fans are going to remember this. This is a
Yeah.
point click adventure game. They are, or this is an adventure game. They will remember these
Remember.
choices.
You remember these choices? What did they say in
They
Walking
will
Dead?
remember this,
They
or
remember.
they
Yeah, they
won't
won't.
remember this, or whatever. But yet, this is the kind of stuff that it will haunt a studio for some time. And maybe again in 5, 10 years or less than that, people will forget, or enough of that DNA is gone to the studios now doing something else differently. But it is such a, burning the bridge and destroying everything kind of decision making. Like we've said, like with Hideo Kojima, that a lot of people have just, turned Konami into a pariah when it comes to their
Yeah,
games. and it's
Yeah.
going to take a massive amount of a change to rectify that. I mean, Capcom has, I think, bounced back. Like, there was a
Back.
period
Yeah.
where people despised Capcom.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
again, they
Same
got
here.
rid of Mega Man, they got rid of Resident Evil, they got rid of Devil May Cry, and then the span of, like, what were we, like, 5 years, give or take, they have, really redeemed themselves.
Yeah.
But again, this is not something that you can just, flick a switch and, everyone hates you, everyone loves you, and just go
Right.
back and forth like that.
And again, like you said, when you decimate, when you remove very important people from the studio, it takes so much time, years and years and years, like um to get back, if possible, to where you were before. You know what I mean? To find that right person who can help maybe guide it in the same direction, who maybe find someone who is an excellent developer who loved that franchise and understands it, and they really see what it is and what the vision was, and they can help lead it back in that direction. But again, it takes so much time to get back all that goodwill that they had,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those things. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
And I guess as one final point, it's also, as the flip side, it's why when you do have that magic combination, when you have everyone working in sync, that you protect that,
Yeah.
no matter what. That
Yeah.
yes, you can add new people. That does not say you never hire anyone new ever again. But when you got that really great groove, when everyone is working in sync, that can be a huge asset to
Yeah.
anything, not just with video games, with any kind of production.
Anything. Yeah. And I mean, like, you can't, like, okay, if for you take solo devs out there, and you're like, okay, well, let me start working with someone else, and you start working with someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden it's like, it's not like doubled, it's like tripled or quadrupled, like what if there's you are grooving and you're working what you can
Mm-hmm.
do at three, and then you're a team, you release a game, and then you iterate and work on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that takes a long time to cultivate. You know what I mean? Like, the friendships and the creativity, the wavelengths, being understanding the visions together, all that stuff takes a lot of time to cultivate and to build. And yeah, so once you have that, protect that. That is definitely a baby to protect for
Yep.
sure.
Because when you lose it, it's not going to just, you can't
No,
just immediately hire someone and
no,
it's back.
no, no, no,
Maybe
no,
it
no.
comes back in months or years, but it doesn't just magically, again, flip that switch and everything's back to normal again.
Yeah, not gonna happen. Sadly, not gonna happen. But
Mm-hmm.
it probably shouldn't happen, because you shouldn't let those things dissolve and be ruined. You should protect them and keep it together. You know.
Mm-hmm. All right, but I think with that, I think that's a good point to end on. Do you have anything else on your notes?
Let me see. Da, 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 da. I think that was it. They're just very sad. I mean, when you messaged me and you said, "Hey, did you hear the news?" And I was still really sick, and I thought it was like a fever dream when you told me what happened. And so and then I started reading, and I just couldn't believe it. But it's sad, and I think later when we revisit this, we'll look over it, and we hopefully will learn a lot from this, and everybody can take away some smart business sense things to do, and other important things. I think there's already small minor lessons here that we can take away, but further in the future we'll definitely want to revisit this. And for that,
Mm-hmm.
just make sure, just all I can say is just bone up on some business acumen. Do take like a Udemy class, just go get a book, read up on it, study up marketing. It's not that hard like to do. It's just doing it right. It's just like, just get into it and do it, and that will offer just a little modicum of protection for you, and especially, don't sign a contract without reading it also, is what I can say.
Oh, yes.
So that's about all I gotta say on that, man.
And
And
exactly, Chris.
play Disco Elysium if you haven't.
Mm-hmm. And follow what Chris just said. Just hit that multiplayer button. Just do all that bonus specking when you start, and you'll be fine.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
All right, but I think with that, we are going to say goodnight for our episode. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching us, whether you're catching this live or recorded. If you want to follow me and all that, do the liking, subscribing, and commenting.
Yeah, definitely. Don't forget, Josh's book is on that Humble Bundle, so pick that up. Everything is down below. Wishlist Samurai Pig. All my things are down below. Join on the Discord and follow and have a chat so we can talk about what's going on for our next things.
Yeah. We still have to get things prepared for the influential games and all that. Yep, and exactly. Go buy like 30 copies of my book, get sent to jail, make a video game. You'll be instantly successful.
That's right.
There we go. But we will be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET for the next show. Again, do all that joining, check out all the links, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, everybody, take care.